Hi everyone, welcome back to the Dynamics 365 Tips and Tricks webinar for the month of March. Today we're going to go over the following 3 tips. So first we're going to talk about if your this little section My Apps is missing from your settings sitemap or settings menu. We're going to talk about how to add that manually to the sitemap. It's pretty easy, but you do need a very specific URL, which I have in the blog post, so I'm going to reference that, and we will go ahead and add that. Next, we're going to add a calendar view using the view calendar control. This is only available in the new unified interface. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to edit the data in fields in the header of a unified interface form. This sounds straightforward, but you'd be surprised at how this is not super straightforward because you can't just click on the data anymore. You have to click on this little arrow. So I'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, so going over to our actual Dynamics 365, again, the first thing we're going to talk about is adding My Apps to the sitemap. So I think in this example, I have added it. So what we're looking for is this My Apps section. It's always going to be in settings. Some people have it and some people don't. And if you're missing it, it's possible to add it after the fact. If you click in it, once you do add it, it's just going to show you all of the unified interface and classic apps that you have available. And you can manage security roles from here to provide access to different apps for different people. And here you can see web, unified interface, just denoting if it's a unified interface app or just a classic web app. Okay, so to start with this, we're going to go back to our unified interface and go ahead and click on the gear icon and select Advanced Settings. That's going to open up Settings in a new window, or a new tab rather. And we want to click Settings, Customizations, then Customize the System. That's going to open up our solution in this window. I'm still preferring to work in the solution in the classic view rather than their new. There is a new like a new look and feel to editing and customizing the solution and entities and stuff, but at the moment it's not 100% built out. Most features are over there, but not everything. So I'm just preferring to still work in this classic view at the moment. So we're going to click on Client Extensions next. And then you're going to need to select the sitemap that you want to edit. This might take, depending on how many apps you're working with, this might take a couple of tries. Some of the names aren't super clear. So you might need to open them up and then compare the actual sitemap that's here with the sitemap of the app that you're working in, just to make 100% sure that you're working in the correct sitemap. And at this point, all of our applications and sitemaps do have the My Apps, but I'm going to show you how to add it again. So I would go under Settings and then select Add Sub Area. And I'm going to scoot back over to the actual blog post because I need to grab the, you're going to want to grab this following URL. So I'm going to copy that. And again, this URL is really important. Go ahead and grab this from the blog post. Or pause the screen and type that out if you need to, or pause the video. All right, and then we're going to go back over to our sitemap designer. And you don't necessarily have to fill this out, but well, we're going to say URL. We're going to add that URL that we just added. We'll say my apps 2, and the rest of the stuff that it fills out here is fine. You can leave it as is. Then we're going to save. And if you added the sub area and it's not where you like it, this is under upgrade logs right now, you can click and drag it. Sometimes it's a little finicky, especially when you're screen sharing, but you can click and drag it over to a different area within settings. Sometimes it gets a little wonky. Just need to start over with that. Okay, one more time. Okay, and I'm just going to stick this under customizations, under my apps, or we'll stick that right there. There we go. Then we're going to save and publish this. All right. So sometimes this takes a couple minutes, but we'll try to just refresh this and hopefully it will have published over to our sitemap. There we go. So you'll see my apps 2 here, and it should take us to the same place. Yep, there we go. So that is how you manually add this My Apps page to your sitemap. The next thing we're going to cover is adding a calendar view to the unified interface. So I'm going to go back to the solution, which we have open, and I'm going to go to the activities entity. And I'm just going to open up the existing views. As you see, we have the activity calendar already. I'm just going to go ahead and say all activities again. We're going to open that up. I like to just save as existing views to make this a little bit more simple. And so you're not starting from scratch with the columns that you're working with. All right. And we will then click on custom controls over on the right, and we're going to add a control and add calendar control right here. These radio buttons are meant to set this as the default setting for web, phone, and tablet versus the read-only grid. I have found that this isn't always consistently working for me in the unified interface. Sometimes it requires a refresh. But after you do that, you can edit the calendar control settings here. And if you click on the little pencil and select start date, you can set it to actual start and end or scheduled start and end. I'm going to use scheduled. So I'm going to say scheduled start for the start date. It wants you to add a description as well. So we'll just say description, that works. And then we'll select the end date. You don't have to select an end date or an end time, but it does show the duration then. So we're going to do that, scheduled end. And this works with custom entities too, I believe. You can also assign it a color if there is like an option set on the field. You can have like an activity type color code situation. You can set that as well. And then that's it. So we're just going to save and close that. And then we're going to publish these. And we will open up the unified interface again. There we go. We're going to click on activities and go in here. And hopefully here we have our activity calendar 2. I'm going to select it. Don't be surprised if you don't see the activity calendar show up immediately. I've been having some issues with Chrome, as you can see. So there are 2 options here. For me, I find that usually just a Control R or like a hard refresh initiates the calendar view. I'm hoping this is I think this is just a bug that needs to be fixed, or maybe my Chrome version isn't quite working with this control. But as you can see, if you go to the month view, we could see 1 activity in here. The day is highlighted as well. And then you can have a sub filter here showing the, filtering of activities depending on the due date. You can also toggle this by selecting the ... up here and then show as. You can toggle between read-only grid and the calendar view. It'll say CC calendar name. So that's another way to toggle between a grid and the calendar view if you want to just have, you don't have to have a view called activity calendar. You could just use all activities and add the calendar control and just toggle between the 2 that way. All right, so finally, our last tip is editing fields in the header. So I'm going to go back to our accounts. And I'm talking about these fields up here. If you're trying to edit these and you're clicking on them and it's only highlighting them as text, all you need to do is select this arrow to the right and you can edit the fields as needed. And that's it. And then you can just click outside of the box. There's no OK or anything like that. And then you just save the record down below. Oh, I've got a required field. And that would be it. And then you can just save the record. And that's how you would go about editing the fields up in the header up here. All right, so quick summary of what we talked about today. First, we talked about adding the My Apps area or sub area to your sitemap if you're missing it. It's pretty easy to do, but you need to know which sitemap you're trying to edit, and you need to grab the specific URL that I mentioned in the blog post here. Next, we added a calendar control to a view, which allowed us to display, in this case, activities on a calendar, which is really handy. I've also done this with resource bookings. If you use the project automation solution by Microsoft or field service. And then finally, we talked about editing fields in the header in the unified interface. All right, so I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave a comment or email me directly at megan@marksgroup.net. Or like I said, leave a comment on one of these posts. I do see them. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to respond to them, but I do try to get to everybody. So thank you so much for joining. Again, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys next time.